Hola, my number is Ramirez. A bit later than usual on my video. Ramirez, this is FrogBear.zil. Uh, Today I called this stream, called it something very triggering. Patriot who patronized. Um, a patriot who patronized. Now, most of why, like, if you ever look at any of my old videos that have really weird titles and you'd wonder to yourself, why did he use this word to describe the theme of this video? And with patronized, I was talking about this yesterday with that stupid Glenn Beck video that I found. But when somebody is being patronized, that means they're being assisted with something. And I don't think that people realize that the people who have the most to lose in this reality would be the people who fought for this reality. The people who fought, died, bled, who lost their comrades at war. Those are the people who really suffer the most brunt of this ideological war, because it's usually the men at the Pentagon, it's military men or men who understand the political warfare, siege aspect of things. They're the ones who really understand why our reality has to be patronized. Our reality has to fit a certain subsector of how you view the world. And if it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, and if it doesn't fit that, and if you encounter anything that does not fit that mold of reality, you as an individual will reject it naturally. Like, nobody has to give you the order to deny that reality. You will do it yourself, right? People have their own internal defense mechanisms when they encounter aspects of the truth that they default to. It's why I brought up how most people will always defend themselves with whatever parroting that they've been programmed with, which is kind of hilarious. Why the project that the CIA ran was called Project Mockingbird, because that's what a mockingbird does. A mockingbird, whatever. Let's not even get into the whole symbolism woo-woo aspect of things. So when I bring up the word patriot, I'm really harboring on the idea that there are people who will live and die for this message, live and die for that ideology, live and die for those subset standards of their reality. And that's usually all propagandized. It's usually all part of a marketing firm scheme, or it was a part of some effort when they were writing a textbook that they made sure that they angled history a certain way. It's why the Vietnam War kind of sits in a very weird location to our history. Meanwhile, I thought it was hilarious that I just recently discovered that two of our modern allies are the Vietnamese and the Japanese. And these are two countries that America did not treat very kindly during the 60s and 70s. So I find it interesting how are you friends? How did you find yourself in these circumstances to consider yourself friends after all of the atrocities that occurred between us? I don't know. Very interesting stuff when you think about it that way. But beyond that, this will get more into, that's one division of people who will try to keep the mold of reality, right? Patriots who are either in service or who are out of service will have aspects of themselves and try to maintain a reality, right? Because if anybody tries to talk to them about certain aspects of the war or certain aspects of interpretation of whatever, things that relate to the war, they themselves will have an internal bias that exists for them to maintain the facade for when they go home, right? It's like a perfect example would be like, oh, this is classified information. You're not allowed to tell civilians this. Well, fucking obvious, right? But that's to maintain a standard, right? As it's obvious with confidential information. What about all the soldiers that came back and told Americans that yes, I was hired to guard poppy fields? What about all those American soldiers? Why did they never speak out? Why is that considered classified information? And then you find out that the term classification and classified as a whole exist to determine the status of certain information. And remember, this all goes back to Patronized, right? Because all of this falls under the assistance factor, right? You're being patronized. Stop patronizing me, which means stop creating these set conditions that assist me in my view of the world. And that's just, right, I'm using the military because a lot of strong emotions and a lot of strong interpretations are created during these events. And primarily, again, the only people that I consider that actually... Right, because I'm talking about war. More than anything, just the war front. The understanding of war. How we interpret war. How information gets to us as citizens that largely pertains to warfare activity. The reason why I bring this up by and large part is because not that long ago I watched a video talking about how you will never see any real war footage that came out of the Middle East. But if it's from Ukraine, but if it comes from Ukraine, they're more than willing to put it in front of you to assist with that reality they want to create for you. Either way. And that's just with war, right? Now let's get into politics. I'm with her, right? Hillary Clinton. And the lack of wherewithal, the lack of understanding of who the fuck this woman is and what she stood for, what she's done, and by and large, right? Like, these are things you can look into. These are things that she has a paper trail. She has a history. All normal people have a history. And in people's history, who writes that history? In modern day, it's Google. I don't know if I have to spell that out to anybody. In modern day, it's Google. In modern day, it's modern institutions. Who gets right? People don't want to quantify this, but how many editors exist in the world? Right? How many people have a position of a job that has the ability to publish a book? How many of them, right? And that's just a book. When you start asking these logistical questions, you tend to figure out that there's probably less than 1,000 editors that exist in the world. And when I say this, I'm not saying like independent editors. Now more than ever, you can edit your own work, publish it on Amazon, but that's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the establishment, the institution, reputable sources that have years of dignity, years of valor, years of this and that bullshit, whatever lip service I could say. Point is, if you haven't existed for over 50 years and if you don't have access to the entire domestic market or the entire international market, that's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the big players who essentially created a name for themselves through the veneer of whatever perception they were building that allowed them to establish this reputation later down the years, right? I don't know. I think like some of the major publishing houses you could probably say are like Penguin, because they publish a whole ton of fucking ton of books. Does this have a editor? Vintage. I don't know. Either way, you can assume that there are bigger publishers that have access to bigger markets, right? And I largely now, when I speak of any of this, I largely exclude any of the modern facilities that we have nowadays, like Amazon. Anybody can publish a book on Amazon nowadays. So these things don't necessarily apply because I want to say 2007 we could say 2007 and back, if you wanted to get your book published, there were very few avenues that you had. If you wanted to consider yourself a scholarly journalist or a scholarly book writer, there were only so many opportunities that you had. And how can I assume this? Well, look at Graham Hancock. Look at people who've wanted to publish different alternative versions of certain popular theories, and just look at how difficult it was for them to have access to these markets. Well, it's because they're spreading misinformation. No. You're not encompassing the whole question. The question that I'm bringing up, this is why it's a very difficult topic for me to bring this up, in what it means to be patronized. People don't realize that the institution, from science to literature to any educational institution to any political institution to any whatever thing that is established amongst behind a mission and behind whatever it wants to maintain as a status quo, whatever that institution does, right? Let's talk about science. Now more than ever, you can look and prove instances of nepotism, instances where one person scratches another person's back, which then scratches this person's back. This cycle, it's a vicious cycle. And in science, more than any other institution, it's like a dogfight. Good luck trying to get into any of these higher sciences or these higher realms of status without having to do some egregious shit that probably will either belittle one of your future students, will belittle future resources, or belittle future research that could then topple over older research. These instances happen time and time again, and it's all to maintain a lie, because X, Y, or Z grandfather scientist, we can't disrespect his image because we have to maintain. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, science won't move forward if we keep doing this pandering, patronizing bullshit, because we're just assisting in the reality that we want to see forward for everyone else, right? And over and over and over again, you can see it in a variety of different fields, in a variety of different industries, where there is always the maintainment of the lie, always the maintainment of the bullshit. Because if it unravels, people lose their jobs, people lose their livelihoods, people lose their businesses. A whole plethora of things could happen, all because a lie was exposed. People patronize and people don't participate in the patronizing. I largely do not want to facilitate in the maintainment of this lie, because it's like, I know the truth. I will always hold the truth internally. So when I move forward in life, it's like, oh, I'm not, right? People will always ask me, aren't you fazed about your faith? Aren't you fazed about believing in Jesus or in believing in God? And I'm like, no, not really. It actually bolsters my faith, because look at how often you'll find motherfuckers trying to lie. Look at how often you're going to find people who are trying to change history, trying to change the definition of things, trying to change the origin of things. So if there wasn't really this whole little special thing, then why are we literally seeing all of these players, all of these entities, all of these lobbyist groups, all of these institutions attempt their hand at maintaining a lie? Now, some people could say that the video that I used with Glenn Beck, some people can be totally fine and say that I'm pulling on threads because the Smithsonian made a mistake. The Smithsonian took the picture upside down, and because nobody was educated enough to know what ancient Hebrew looked like back in the 1920s here in America, nobody could tell that it was Hebrew. It was an honest mistake. Well, keep in mind how many times that gets said about everything, about the destruction of bones, about the destruction of sites, about the destruction of material, about the destruction of, about the murder of certain people. About, if you keep saying that over and over again, you do realize that eventually becomes a statistical anomaly, right? Oh no, but we have to believe in the good heart faith of people. Shut the fuck up, you dumb bitch. Like, for real. Like, you can only say it's only a coincidence after the 20th time. At that point, you have to start realizing that you're being patronized to. You're being assisted into viewing the world or viewing whatever thing in contextualization that you're looking at. You know what I mean? Like, dude, motherfuckers look at me, bro. You suspend your disbelief all the time, man. You entertain such crazy ideas, and I'm like, oh, I'm the one who doesn't. I'm the only person who entertains all this dumb shit. You do realize the mainstream narrative is still that Epstein killed himself, right? So who realistically is living a patronized world? Me or other people? Ask yourself that. Because the way I see it is, if Epstein killed himself, and looking at the context behind his situation, the context and the theme of how his court case was going to be laid out, it looks like, and I think you can ask anybody else, it's pretty fucking obvious that there were people who did not want to be named in that court case. If you look at American history, anytime somebody goes to court or goes to jail or goes and creates this circumstance where a case could go forward, where people could get exposed, what ends up happening to them? Oh, well, he got killed, so what a weird coincidence. Now the case can't go forward. Sorry, guys. Well, you know, all those criminals, their heart grew 3 times the size. They're good people now. We don't have to worry about it. Like, dude, huh? Like, and I'm not even really picking apart of to the extent of what I believe being patronized is. The moment you step foot into preschool, the moment you get taught mathematics, the moment you get taught any subject, the moment you get taught what the color red is, you're being patronized. Think about that. No. Yes, the world is a lie. That's exactly what I'm saying. And it's okay. The world is a lie. We have to understand that our background will largely form our belief system of what we're looking at. If we look at this card, this is the color red. Why? Because that's what I was taught. I was patronized to believe that this is the color red. The same way that this top rim color is blue. We largely as a people have told and taught each other, we've patronized each other into understanding what the world is before us. But that also works the other way. We can also be patronized into believing things that aren't necessarily true. For example, 9/11, weapons of mass destruction. I always love bringing that one up. Just because of how deeply rooted it is into where we are now. The war in the Middle East, the Syria chemical bombings, the pipelines, the displacement of the mass displacement of African immigrants into Europe, all of these things that are happening right now are in large part thanks to what? Think about that. 9/11. None of these things would have happened or developed the way they did if 9/11 didn't exist. If that rhetoric that allowed us to jump into a war didn't exist, if that excuse, if that marker in time did not exist, people would not have been patronized or assisted or told those are the people we need to go to war for, and these are the reasons why, right? That all falls into being assisted with a paradigm view, with an answer, with a conclusion in order for action to be done. Being patronized. It all comes down to being patronized. So when I look at the right-left paradigm, the words left, right wing, left wing, authoritarian, all of these definitions, all of these words mean nothing to me because I know I'm being patronized into one camp or the other. I'm being assisted with my thoughts, with my beliefs, to join one movement or another. But who's doing the patronizing? This is a verb. You could understand that somebody has to do this. Somebody has to write these words. Somebody has to write this message, understand the narrative, be able to communicate that same narrative. Who's doing the patronizing? And what agenda does it follow? Because sometimes when you could be patronized into assisting or becoming a part of something that's natural and organic. But that's not how it works in this reality. These current circumstances of this reality tell us that you need resources, money, and all these other facets of things in order for your message to be spread across, right? You don't just become viral because you upload a video to the internet. There are other factors that will play into that drive, right? That's what Cambridge Analytica was, or at least it attempted to understand trends on the internet in order to manipulate public opinion, blah blah blah. Right? We have a variety of other instances like Cambridge Analytica. We have marketing firms, we have data collection firms, we have Google listening to the microphone firm. All to understand the individual in order to be able to patronize and assist the individual with whatever their query is, with whatever their question is, with whatever they're trying to buy is, with whatever belief system they're trying to further research, further learn about, right? If I start talking about needing an algebra book and I start getting recommended algebra books, you have to understand that to some degree your reality is being assisted. So that's why I don't participate in any definitive arguments, in any definitives when I'm in a debate, because these things are not really definitive in my head, because I understand that certain rhetoric or the way that certain words get formed to create an argument only exist to patronize certain realities that they want to create. It's why I hate Zionists. It's why I hate evangelicals. It's why I hate blind faith religious zealots. It's why I hate ethnoist. By ethnoist, right? It's a weird ass word. But anybody who puts a race, a color of a skin, or an identity above everything else, I call you an ethnoist, because you do not care about the concept, the conclusion, the equation, or how the system works. Like, you do not care about that. What you largely care about is the identity, the color, the color of the team, the jerseys that these people are wearing. That's what you care more about. You care more about the image, the identity of the thing, and not the substance of it, not the systems that govern over these things. You care more about who's running the thing. You care more about what team or what sponsor do we have. That's why I call you ethnoist, because you don't. Most people would be like, oh, wingnut or ethnoist. By ethnoist, they would assume that I'm talking about like people who consider themselves racially superior. Fuck no. They consider their identity superior, because they largely always discount the contextual lives, right? Like, some of these people will they'll fantasize and like kind of jerk off to people like Cecil Rhodes, and they'll like masturbate to the ideas of what this guy had, but they won't understand why this guy came up with these concepts and why his conclusions came out to be that way, without realizing that you do not fit in that paradigm, because he's talking about a very different individual that he's observing, and his conclusions were born from his observations, right? He patronized himself into believing these ideas because he already had a conclusion in mind. Because the way I see it, he might be talking about the English people or the British people by and large, but he's talking about a workforce. A workhorse, right? He's only talking about people in terms of using them for the means of production. He's not talking about how you're superior and you're going to stand amongst us, the other elite. That's not And people have to be very careful with the choice of words that their idols use, because you typically find out that they don't really give a fuck about you or anybody else. They care about you in terms of being able to use you as a peasant, as a workhorse, as somebody to give responsibilities to, right? Like a government, like not government, corporation. It's like having the owner of a company delegate to one of his trusted aides to then find other trusted aides, managers, superintendents, to then do what? Reign over what? Their jurisdiction, their department, their office, their branch, their this. But don't realize that these ideas came from somewhere, and by and large, right, you're not really given anything. You're given roles, you're given responsibilities. So you're patronizing, now you've become the patronizer, right? You've become the person who will maintain the status quo of whatever position you're working, because like that's why I said superintendent, because superintendents are given areas and they're allowed to govern within those areas, and their decision supersedes all the other employees. It's kind of like a viscount, a marquis, somebody with a title, because they will go back to the main branch, the main house, and give his reports to, right? Like, people don't realize that corporations are just a different way of obfuscating leadership roles, because just because it says the CEO, that doesn't mean he owns anything. Because of the documentation and the way that the court kind of words this all out, that's called UBO, the ultimate beneficiary owner, right? The person who gets the profits of the company, that's a completely different person to who gets to be the CEO of a company. That's all other branch of thought that most people are not privy to. So, man, I can make videos days on describing how people are patronized. What's my time actually? Good marker, because I need to figure out 27 minutes in. All right, yeah, this is a good way for me to stop this. This is a good place for me to end this, because I still haven't gone full in on the ideas of being patronized. Because being patronized in what way? I merely described the war front, certain aspects of maintainment of status quo, but I'm not really fully describing the extent of how this rolls. This is why I always bring up Leviathan, because everyone on Earth got programming, right? Programming from Disney, programming from Nickelodeon, programming from Cartoon Network, programming from whatever favorite channel you grew up watching, from whatever program, television show, movies, XYZ. There were underlying themes in all of this entertainment material, which then influenced you as a growing adult to either mimic or understand the behavior you were watching, right? That's why some people wear those anime capes when they went to school, you know what I'm saying? And they wanted to affirm their reality with what they saw on the television, right? It's why it's important to know that what you see on television isn't real. Whole other issue. So, right, that's the aspect of you being patronized through entertainment, and you doing the whole monkey see, monkey do thing that most kids do, right? That's why they put commercials for toys and all this other bullshit on television. It's largely because they're patronizing to you. They're marketing towards you. They're trying to make sure that you get conveyed the idea. But during that time, the TV show, the entertainment, could have words that describe themes or things in your reality that will be like, yes, right? Every time there's a cartoon show and they show that the world is round, that's an aspect of affirming the reality that we live in. I don't take a stand on if it's round or flat. I don't care. But I'm just describing the fact that if a TV show exists out there and in the TV show they say that the world is flat, that's affirming that reality. There's another TV show that says the earth is round. That's another reality that they're affirming. Just saying simple statements as that, saying simple statements as this is the color red, is a way of affirming a reality. That's why I think it's funny, hilarious, right? Because a current example of this, Sesame Street has removed 200 episodes from their catalog. Sesame Street. What were on those 200 episodes? What were those, right? When you think about Sesame Street, what do they affirm? They affirm the alphabet. They affirm numbers. They affirm concept of friendship that you have with your friends. And now more than ever, these television shows are now going to be affirming LGBTQ. Relations that fit outside of the male-female aspect of things. That's just entertainment. That does not go into Bible. That does not go into politics. That does not go into religious sectors and their lobbyist firms. Think about that. The fact that you cannot describe Jewish people easily because it doesn't describe the people who speak Yiddish. It doesn't describe the Pharisees. It doesn't describe the Canaanites. It does not describe the real Israelites. It does not describe the discrepancies between the region that they say that they're from, but their genetic background is different. You cannot bring up any of these subjects because all aspects of reality have affirmed a singular view of what Jewish people are. And a lot of it comes from World War II. Keep that in mind. And everything will affirm it, right? All of the war movies that we've watched, all of the traumatizing shows, or what books did I read in high school? Like Night, Elise Wild, Night, Schindler's List, any book that came out of World War II, any books about genocide, anything talking about these themes will revolve around what happened during World War II, will revolve around some Jewish person, because the person who either wrote the book, directed the thing, or aspects of how this thing was developed for entertainment purposes had aspects of Jews being involved in it. Right? And the reality that they will portray in front of you will not be the whole truth. It'll be only a half truth, because the way that they're angling the story from the beginning is in order to patronize and to only fulfill one way of viewing that exact thing, assisting in your reality. And this comes down to, I came up with the whole concept of being patronized too, with the fact that watching that Glenn Beck video and him saying Pharisees, him equating the Pharisees to being Hebrews. No, my boy. No, my boy. You can't just say these things and be like, yes, the Pharisees. No, was it the Pharisees? Who am I thinking of? Not the Pharisees. Who was it? It was the merchant class. What do they call themselves? How did that word escape me? Have I been saying Pharisees this whole time? Either way. It's just that there's all these words that people will say in the same sentence just to equate, oh, both of these things are equal. No, they're not. Pharisees, Hebrews, Canaanites, whatever the fuck. Like, there's just so much being hidden. That's largely what you'll find out. When you're being assisted with these things that affirm aspects of reality, the reason why they're there is because there's money there. People put money towards teaching people these things so that if anybody ever decides to question outside of these parameters, whoa, you're an anti-Semite, you know. Like, no, I'm not. I'm just merely pointing out that your people aren't necessarily the real Israelites because of these events that happened in these geolocations, and doesn't also match up where your people come from if you look at the... Right? Because I'm not interested in affirming a reality that only affirms war. Right? All of this is around war. All of this stuff revolves around a very peculiar thing that happened at a UN meeting that essentially allowed the purchase of Palestine. And that is why I hate Zionists. I fucking hate evangelical Christians, because it's not about what's right or wrong. It's not about the truth for these people. It's about religious zealotry. It's about how what the Bible says. Shut the fuck up, dude. Like, either way, I think I'll leave it there. Are you being patronized too? Is your reality being affirmed by the things that you say? And remember, if you see it on YouTube and it's still allowed on YouTube, you should really think, why hasn't this gotten kicked off of YouTube? Why is this allowed? But every other person who attempted to speak the truth wasn't allowed on YouTube. But yet, all these other things are allowed on YouTube? What's the purpose? Are you being patronized too? Are you falling for the marketing scheme? Are you falling for whatever new current trend is the new ideological sphere of things? This is why I just keep track of trends. Right now, the current trend is the red pill man stuff that talks about the dynamics between men and women. And some people would be like, wow, they're really trying to distract us with the psyop here. And it's like, actually, no, this is a part of the psyop, because remember, people were made retarded. People were made stupid. So of course they lost the ability of understanding the gift of gab, the ability to be able to spit game, the ability to be able to understand social standing, the degree of knowing why it's important for having a wife or for having a future with somebody. So many foreign concepts that people have been lost to because their reality has been patronized to in believing whatever marketing model love falls for, right? Whatever marketing model that our lives fall into. You reach this age, you do these things. You reach this age, you do these things. Without fully realizing that the system created these paradigms of our reality, right? It's taught all of the generation of, right? My generation, right? Because I'm 29. They're all of the females that I grew up with, from like middle school, high school, whatever. Now they're reaching their 30s, all to fall for the trap that was created for the system, right? Because now you have 30-year-old women who have had all these terrible relationships, who probably have kids from all these terrible relationships. It has affirmed a reality for these women that men aren't shit. So when they actually get into a relationship and they try to have a family, they're going to be biased with that patronized view of men. So they treat their man, who will then deal with them, like absolute garbage, because that man doesn't understand his own status, his own self. And that doesn't even account if he's traumatized. That doesn't account if he's educated. That doesn't account all these other aspects of things. So when these two people have a family together and these children are growing up, they're already growing up with a very skewed view of the world, and the world that's going to affirm these skewed visions of their world are what? The education system. Main and shit. This and that. Blah, blah, blah. And then they get caught up in the cultural warfare because mom doesn't care. Dad's too busy at work. So nobody's really taking care of the mental health of the kid. And the only person affirming their reality and patronizing to their reality is who? The state, the school, their friends. And what do they all believe in? Whatever marketing firm, what's the new trend on the market? What's the new trend on the internet? Right? All reality is being patronized too.